I caught my wife cheating and exposed her affair to everyone. Here's what happened. My wife, Jessica, and I had been together for over 5 years. We met in college, and I thought we were the perfect couple. We were both career-driven, but we made time for each other. We took trips, went to dinners, and enjoyed each other's company. Of course, we had our disagreements, but who doesn't? Nothing that would have hinted at what was coming. The first time I noticed something was off was a few months ago. Jessica, who was always a homebody, started working later and later at the office. "I've got a big project, babe. It's a deadline," she'd tell me, her voice strained. But when I'd text her, she wouldn't respond for hours. Not typical. Jessica was usually quick with a reply, especially when it came to me. I convinced myself it was nothing. A busy project, long hours. I knew how much she cared about her job, and I trusted her. But the unease continued to grow. She stopped answering my calls when she was out with friends, claiming she was out of service range, or in a meeting, every time I tried to reach her. The stories she told didn't add up. It was the little things. Her phone was always face down, her password was suddenly more complicated, and when I asked her where she'd been, she'd get defensive. I tried not to let it consume me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I had no proof, only whispers in my head telling me to pay closer attention. Then came the night I decided I couldn't ignore it any longer. It was a Saturday evening, and Jessica had said she was going out for drinks with her coworkers. I didn't think much of it at first. She'd done it before, but that night, I couldn't shake the thought that maybe, just maybe, this was when everything would change. When I got home from a work dinner, I noticed her car wasn't in the driveway. That wasn't unusual, but what happened next was, I checked her social media. There, I saw something that turned my stomach. A post from one of her friends in the office. It was a group picture. At first glance, nothing seemed off. But then I saw her. Jessica was standing there with a man I didn't recognize. They were close, laughing with their arms around each other like they were more than just coworkers. The caption read, "Another night out with my favorite partners in crime." Something about the way they looked together, the closeness, struck me deeply. It wasn't just a friendly night out. There was chemistry there. I didn't know this guy, but I felt a pang in my chest that I couldn't ignore. I spent the next hour going through every post, every comment. My heart raced as I found more pictures, more moments of Jessica and this man together, laughing, talking, sometimes standing too close. There was a part of me that wanted to scream, another part that wanted to curl up and pretend this wasn't happening. Finally, I reached out to one of her old friends. I needed to know if she had been seeing this guy outside of work. And that's when it hit me. The friend hesitated, then confirmed my worst fear. This wasn't just a coworker. It was someone she had been seeing behind my back. I could barely breathe. The room felt like it was closing in on me. The woman I trusted most in this world had betrayed me. There was no denying it anymore. This was it. She was having an affair. I didn't sleep that night. I barely moved. The weight of the realization settled heavily on my chest. It felt surreal, like I was trapped in a nightmare I couldn't escape. How could I have missed all the signs? How could she betray me like this? What did I do wrong? But what came next wasn't just about heartbreak, it was about what I was going to do about it. The following days were a blur. I couldn't think straight, couldn't focus on anything other than the overwhelming sense of betrayal. I had to know the truth. If she was going to hide it from me, I was going to find out everything. Every text, every message, every secret. It wasn't just about the affair, it was about taking back control, about facing the reality of what my wife had done. I waited until the evening when Jessica got home, pretending to be normal. But my mind was racing. I had already confirmed with her friend that Jessica was indeed seeing someone, but I couldn't help myself. I had to hear it from her. I had to confront her, to look into her eyes and demand the truth. When Jessica walked through the door, I pretended I hadn't seen anything. I greeted her like I normally would, trying to act like everything was fine. But the truth was, I couldn't hold it in any longer. "Hey, Jess, we need to talk," I said, my voice steady, though my heart was pounding. She gave me a confused look. "Sure, what's up?" "About the trip last weekend. Who was that guy you were with?" Her eyes widened for a split second, but she quickly masked it with a forced smile. "What are you talking about?" I took a deep breath. "Don't lie to me. I saw the photos. I know what's going on." The smile faded from her face, replaced by a tense silence. For a moment, she said nothing, and the air in the room seemed to grow thick with tension. She knew I knew, but she wasn't ready to admit it. I could see the wheels turning in her mind, trying to figure out what to say, how to lie her way out of it. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said finally. but I could tell her voice lacked conviction. You don't have to lie anymore, Jessica. I've seen everything, your messages, the photos, the way you look at him. I know what you've been doing, I said, my voice growing colder with every word. Her face turned pale. She took a step back as if the weight of her lies had finally caught up with her. Please, we can talk about this. It's not what you think. Really? I scoffed. Then what is it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks pretty clear to me. She tried to change the subject, pleading for me to calm down, but I wasn't having it. The betrayal ran too deep, and I needed answers. What hurt the most wasn't just the affair. It was the fact that she'd been lying to my face for months, hiding this secret life from me while pretending everything was fine. I deserve the truth, I said, my voice shaking with barely contained anger. I want to know how long this has been going on. Who is he? How long have you been cheating on me? For a long moment, she didn't say anything. Then, finally, with a sigh, she spoke. It's been going on for 6 months, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. His name is Mark. He works with me. I never meant for it to happen, but I don't know. I wasn't happy. I felt like the air had been knocked out of me. 6 months. She'd been living a double life for half a year, and I had no idea. Every time she told me she was working late, every time she came home smelling like someone else's cologne, those weren't coincidences. She had been lying to me all along. You think this is about you being unhappy? I said, my voice growing louder. You think that justifies what you've done? You've broken my trust, Jess. And now you've broken us. She started crying then, pleading with me to understand, to forgive her. She said it was a mistake, that she didn't mean for it to go as far as it did. But the truth was, I couldn't hear it anymore. Nothing she said would take away the sting of her betrayal. I wanted her to feel the weight of what she'd done, to understand how deeply she'd hurt me. I couldn't keep pretending that this was a marriage anymore. It was a lie. Stop, I said, cutting her off. I don't want to hear it. You've made your choices, and now it's time to deal with the consequences. I couldn't stay in that house with her for another second. I grabbed my keys and walked out, not even bothering to look back. The sound of her sobbing faded as I slammed the door behind me. As I drove aimlessly, my mind kept spinning. I couldn't let this go. Jessica needed to understand that there were consequences for her actions. She thought she could get away with it, but I wasn't going to let her. Not this time. The rage inside me burned hot, but it was also clear. I needed to expose her. Everyone needed to know who she really was. If she wanted to betray me, then she needed to face the truth. And I would be the one to make sure that happened. I didn't know what was worse, the way she had betrayed me, or the way she was trying to justify it. As I sat in my car, parked outside a small bar where I met some old friends to clear my mind, one thing became certain. I couldn't just let this go. If Jessica thought she could quietly move on from this, she was mistaken. There had to be accountability for what she did to me. I tried to calm myself as I sipped my drink, but every time I thought of Jessica with Mark, the anger flared up again. I could still hear her voice, the way she tried to explain her actions as if they didn't destroy everything we had built. 6 months. That was half a year of lies, of cheating behind my back, all while I had been there, believing in her, trusting her. It felt like a punch in the gut every time I thought about it. That's when the idea hit me. If Jessica had no respect for me, no regard for our marriage, then maybe it was time to expose her. Maybe it was time to let everyone know the truth, to let her family and friends see her for what she really was. This wasn't just about my pain, it was about making sure she faced the consequences for her actions. If she thought she could hide behind excuses and a pretty smile, I was going to make sure the truth came out. I called my brother, Mark. I knew he'd understand the pain I was going through, even if he was a bit surprised by the sudden phone call. I wasn't sure what I expected him to say, but his response was exactly what I needed to hear. Dude, I get it, Mark said, after listening to me vent for a few minutes. She betrayed you. She doesn't deserve your silence. If you want to tell everyone, you do it. Just be careful with how far you go. You don't want to get too reckless, but at the same time, she deserves to know there are consequences. His words stuck with me. He was right. I had to do this in a way that wasn't just about revenge. This wasn't about humiliating her. It was about making her realize that her actions had real-world consequences. It wasn't just her who had been affected. I was torn apart, but so were the people who cared about me. Her family, my family, our friends. They deserved to know who she really was. That night, I didn't go home. I couldn't. Instead, I stayed in a hotel, pacing back and forth as I planned my next move. Who should I call first? Her parents? My friends? I needed to hit her where it hurt, get her to face the truth, to see how many people she had lied to. The next morning, I couldn't wait any longer. I grabbed my phone and started reaching out to people. I messaged her brother first. He was the one person I could trust to not immediately take her side, and I knew he would be just as shocked as I was when he found out what she'd been hiding. I sent a long message, explaining what I had discovered and how devastated I was by the affair. I made sure to mention that Jessica had lied to all of us and that it wasn't just a simple mistake, it was a betrayal of everything she and I had built. Then, I reached out to a few of my close friends. I told them about Mark, the man she had been seeing, and how I had caught them in the act. I shared the photos, the texts, everything I had found out. The more I shared, the clearer it became. Everyone needed to know. By the time the afternoon rolled around, my phone was blowing up with responses. Some people were shocked, some were angry, but they all agreed on one thing. Jessica had crossed a line, and now she had to face the consequences. It felt good to finally let go of the silence, to not keep her secret for her. This wasn't about vengeance, it was about forcing the truth into the open. It was about taking control of the situation and making sure she didn't get away with it. Later that night, I received a call from Jessica. Her voice was shaky, a mixture of panic and desperation. She had already heard from her family, her brother, her parents. The shock and anger in their voices had been too much for her. "You can't do this, please," she begged, almost crying. "You're destroying everything." I wasn't moved by her tears. "Not anymore. You did that when you betrayed me, Jessica," I said, coldly. "You thought you could have your cake and eat it too, but now everyone knows. They deserve to know who you really are. I'm not your secret anymore." She tried to make excuses, saying it wasn't what it seemed, that she loved me, that she was sorry. But it was all too late. The truth had come out, and nothing she said could change that. It wasn't about forgiveness anymore. It was about her understanding the depth of the hurt she'd caused. "Don't call me again," I said, hanging up. As I sat in my hotel room that night, staring at my phone, the messages still flooding in, I realized that I had made the right choice. Maybe this wasn't the way I thought things would go, but I couldn't keep living in the dark. The truth was out there, and Jessica would have to deal with it, no matter how much she tried to run from it. But there was one more thing I had to do. Exposing the affair to her family and friends was just the beginning. I still had to figure out what I was going to do about the rest of my life. I couldn't just stay angry. I couldn't let this destroy me. I had to find a way to heal, to rebuild. But that would come later. For now, I had done what I needed to do. After exposing Jessica's affair, I felt a mix of anger and sadness. The truth had come out, and while her family and friends were shocked, I couldn't shake the feeling that the betrayal had destroyed something irreplaceable. Jessica tried to salvage our relationship, bombarding me with messages and even showing up at my apartment, but I ignored her. Nothing she said could undo the damage she had caused. Despite the validation from others, the pain of losing the woman I thought I'd spend my life with lingered. The trust was shattered, and the future we had imagined was gone. Still, I knew I couldn't let this defeat me. I took time for myself, working out, spending time with friends and family, and slowly starting to heal. One evening, I ran into one of Jessica's old friends, who expressed sympathy for what had happened. It was a small but meaningful gesture, reminding me that I wasn't alone in this. As time passed, I distanced myself from people who tried to make excuses for Jessica and focused on my own recovery. The more I let go of the anger, the more clarity I gained. I filed for divorce, knowing that staying in a broken relationship wasn't an option. It was a painful decision, but I felt a weight lift off my shoulders the moment I signed the papers. While the pain didn't disappear overnight, I began to accept what had happened. I didn't deserve this betrayal, but I was still standing, and that was enough. Jessica's attempts to reconcile were rejected because it was too late. I had moved on, not because I found someone new, but because I learned to love myself again. Life moves on, and I'm moving forward with it, one day at a time.